Hi all, my name is Malika and today we are having John Keh. John is a founder of Run the Chain, a full-stack Web3 marketing and consultancy agency. He does a lot of things and we are really happy to have you here today.
Happy to be here.
John, my first question is, how did you first become interested in Web3?
So I think when I was in college, this is like early days for Web3. That's when I first kind of read the news about what Bitcoin is, what it could be. So that's the first spark of interest for me. I think it really manifested in 2017 during the first ICO stage. But yeah, first point of interest was more kind of something that's very esoteric, but talking about something that's a decentralized currency that might have value someday.
Cool. And what do you think? What are the benefits of Web3 technology comparing to traditional web technology?
So what is Web3? Web3 is blockchain. A synonym for blockchain is decentralized ledger technology, right? So in the name, I think that Web3 is basically a decentralized iteration of Web2 technology, right? And that means that things are, in some cases, democratized, but at the very least, there is more transparency as far as I don't need to trust a single point of failure, a single point of truth, right? That could be obfuscated based on whatever interest that central entity has versus, anyone in the world can set up a Bitcoin node and validate this information, same as, most blockchains where it's decentralized. So I think the real kind of edge here is the decentralization of the ledger, right? And if you look at, simply put, that's a decentralized spreadsheet, right? But the entire global financial market runs on spreadsheets. So it's a decentralized version of that.
Great answer. Thank you so much. And what excites you most about the future of Web3 technology?
What excites me most? I think for me, what's been most interesting entering the Web3 space, not so long ago, as far as traditional terms go, 2019 is when I entered, is the fact that I've had the opportunity, pretty, narrow tunnel vision focused on Web3 to touch on so many other industries, whether that be entertainment, music, arts, what have you, that have now come to our industry. So I think the most exciting part about Web3 is that in very few kind of careers, jobs, industries, do you have the opportunity to touch on so many different kind of passions that you might have on the side. So I think it is very much an integral part of what the future becomes, because it's decentralized, like DeFi, decentralized finance, right? That's kind of what a big part of Web3 is. And if you look at finance as a category, this touches on every single aspect of every industry in the world, right? So this is, art, music, this is all these other things, and being a part of an industry that has such a wide scope of other industries and verticals that it touches on is exciting to me.
Thank you. And how do you approach marketing Web3 projects to a wider audience?
That's a very good question. I think right now it's difficult because we don't have enough tooling. We don't have enough infrastructure. For example, the average person doesn't understand computer programming. They don't understand distribution of cloud storage, stuff like this, but they use Google Drive, they use email, they use a computer every day. So it's about getting to a point where we have the right amount of tooling to provide something that's more easily accessible to the average person.
And what strategies have you found to be effective in raising awareness and adoption for Web3 projects?
I think it really boils down to, there is the whole kind of hype strategy where you kind of create all this noise, create all this hype. But I think really it boils down to real utility value. At the end of the day, I think the next generation of Web3, next cycle, will be defined by real value, right? Real use cases, a UX, UI that people are familiar with. And it's something to where it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better than the Web2 solution. So it doesn't matter that it's blockchain, it doesn't matter that it's Web3, it just is more efficient, right? I think if it creates something that creates real value, then as far as bridging that solution over to a wider audience, it's easy, right? Because it's a matter of fact, rather than trying to chase a trend, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, thank you. And John, what do you think, what role do social media platforms play in the Web3 marketing efforts?
I think with especially stuff like Twitter, with Telegram, it's the foundation of your community, right? I think without them, you can't really build or at least get the right kind of traction you want, the right kind of adoption. And especially at this stage as well, where it is so difficult to kind of convey the message, convey the future. Platforms like this for people who really do believe in what you're building are so important. So I think it's paramount, right? It's kind of chicken and the egg. But without a great product, you can't have the customer base. But without the customer base, what are you building a product for, right?
Yeah, thank you. And how do you stay updated on the latest trends and best practices in Web3 marketing?
I think honestly, it's really touch and go, especially with like Twitter making all these changes to their algorithm and the climate change shifting from a bull market to a bear market. The strategies you used in 2021 versus, last year, this year are very different. I think it really is about having a diverse kind of toolkit that you can play with as far as the things that you're good at, what works and doesn't, and the right timing in the market to use these things that you have. I think there's no silver bullet. It's about kind of setting up the best plan you can, and then also looking at the data once that plan is live and being willing to have a plan B, C, D to adapt, adjust, and iterate.
Cool, thank you. And could you please share some innovative or creative marketing techniques you've seen or used in the Web3 industry recently?
So innovative, I think I won't go too far into all this new AI stuff, which I think is brilliant. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but some of that might be kind of gimmicky. There might be restrictions. I think I'll go more from a perspective of being effective. And I think as far as effectiveness goes, it's more about kind of rolling up your sleeves, being willing to get your hands dirty with the kind of nitty gritty content creation. What's where are the trends at? What's creating value? One of the first things I did joining Web3, or at least early on, was to try and coin the search term for Solana, which was trending at the time. And we did that. Like globally, if you search Solana, you would come to the page of the OTC desk that I was at the time, and also creating terms, or at least popularizing terms like INO, initial NFT offering, right? Which before we put out this content for one of our clients at the time, it wasn't really popularized or didn't really exist. And it's comparable to like an ICO, but instead it's the context of NFTs. I think putting out content like this, being a thought leader and creating something to where in the case of like putting out that INO article, the company we're working with actually came up with the INO launchpad based on the content we'd written, because we're like, well, you could probably do stuff like this. And like, well, before we publish this article, our developers were working on this, right? So having the ability to take something that's kind of very monotonous, very nitty gritty, but also having the understanding, keeping your finger on the pulse to understand what's trending, what's important, where are there gaps, right? We're in such a new industry where you can really pioneer new kind of verticals just through creating real value. And I think that also is in line with, I don't know how to finish that without distracting too much.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you so much. John, what measures do you take to ensure that you don't make false promises to potential users or investors?
That's a good question. I think it's, as a rule of thumb, from a background in marketing before Web3 as well, you never really want to promise sales, right? I think you can hold yourself to KPIs as far as performance, expectation, that. But as far as making promises for like profits, returns, sales, you start to dabble into that kind of security realm where you're going to be scrutinized, for telling someone, I will get you this amount of money for this amount of, fees right now. It becomes something along the lines of a security. So I think it's good to know your limitations, good to have a track record. And in some cases, if you don't have that track record, be willing to kind of piecemeal out free services to show people what you can do in order to open up a door to a services-based relationship without making empty promises, right? You can't control the wind. You can't control, all boats rise and fall with the tide. That's basically Bitcoin. So even if you have the best strategy, the best kind of plan in the world, this has worked 1,000 times in Web 2, you bring this over to Web 3, but the project, the token that you're deploying, it's falling victim to Bitcoin going from like $30,000 to $15,000, right? At that point, it's very difficult to combat market climate, right? The conditions that are out of your control. And if you've made these empty promises, even if if things were normal, they would work. You can't control that, right? So I think it's about being realistic with what you're promising, the KPIs you're holding yourself to, without kind of promising something that's kind of like a financial return. And then also being willing, in the case of not having the track record, not having the kind of rapport with these potential clients or existing clients to kind of extend your services or build that, is to give away something to where you can kind of show either what you've done before, or give them something to say, hey, how about I do this for free, and if you like it, you'll pay us for something else, right?
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great answer. What would you say about the potential for marketing crypto to exploit people's FOMO, fear of missing out, and encourage impulsive investments?
That's kind of the dark side of marketing, because I think to some extent that's an objective for marketers, is to make people feel like if they don't buy that they're missing an opportunity. But at some point, are you soliciting, wrong financial advice, telling people they're going to make returns that they're not going to get? Or are you telling people, hey, this is a great opportunity, here's the fundamentals, here's why it's a great product, here's their growth, presenting things that are true without obfuscating things to promise a false financial return? I think it's a tough line to kind of draw, but I think at some point there is a morally objective standpoint to where it becomes you're creating something as far as, well, if you don't buy this, you're going to miss out, and if you do buy this, you're going to make 10x returns. Something like that's like probably immoral and illegal, versus really outlining, hey, this is a great opportunity, and here's the objective reasons why. They've grown from 1 user to 1 million user in 3 months. They have this great product. They have these great partners. Here's some content, do your own due diligence. I think that there's a line between the two. But it's a good point as far as like FOMO is a great tool, but if applied in the right kind of solution, right? If you're applying it in something that's promising false returns, I think that's like, obviously it's illegal, it's immoral, but there's a fine line between kind of emphasizing the value proposition versus kind of making empty promises financially.
Agree. And John, what are some common misconceptions about crypto and Web3?
So I think a cryptocurrency is not blockchain technology. You do not need a cryptocurrency in order to run a blockchain. There are a lot of companies in the world that are doing this now. A lot of interesting private companies, even publicly listed companies that are doing tests with Web3 technology without a token. Common misconception is that they're synonymous, that they're two and one of the same, and that's just not true. I think that, I think fundamentally that's the biggest misconception, is that if you have a blockchain, you're automatically grouped in with cryptocurrency, whereas you don't necessarily need to have a token in order to have a product on a blockchain.
Totally. What are the key challenges you face when working on Web3 projects?
It's the difference between two ends of the spectrum, one being kind of like the startup world versus the corporate world. In the corporate world, you're like, there's too many fences, there's too many restrictions, I can't kind of get things moving quick enough, versus the Web3 space where you have no fences, especially in Web3, it's all uncharted territory, to where the most difficult thing is being nimble and flexible enough to kind of deal with subjectively what situation you're in, and kind of create processes and evaluate very quickly what is and isn't working, right? Because without any kind of roadmap to follow, it's very easy for you to kind of make mistakes. And also it's okay to make mistakes, right? I think the one thing about Web3 is that like, you're going to make mistakes, especially when you're personally investing, personally getting involved with this stuff, you're probably going to lose a little bit of money to kind of learn how to kind of conduct yourself properly. But I think going into this with that expectation is kind of the right thing to do. And I think the biggest hurdle to overcome is the lack of structure. But at the same time, there's this immense opportunity to try and create structures that haven't existed before, to try and create SOPs that really become industry standard for how you go about doing whatever you're trying to do in Web3. So I think it's a double-edged sword of having the freedom, but at the same time, not really having proper guidance on what has worked before because it's so uncharted.
Thank you. And John, what do you think is the biggest risk facing the Web3 ecosystem in the next few years?
I think obviously there's a lot of regulatory clarity that needs to be provided. And that's pretty much across the board. I'm not going to single anyone out. As well as I think right now, it's not that the technology is too complicated. It's that we're not explaining it well enough, right? Going back to my earlier example is that a lot of people use computers without having any knowledge of a computer programming language, right? And right now, the way you have to interact with the blockchain, the assumption is you need to know how to code, right? I think it's about, hopefully enough of these infrastructure projects, these scalability projects hit fruition to where there's enough tooling that can be built on there, enough decentralized applications to where it becomes a lot more familiar as far as the user experiences you see in Web 2. I think that's really the biggest hurdles.
Yeah, and have you had any legal or regulatory challenges when working on Web3 projects?
I mean, yes, I think that's also part of the reason why, obviously I joined at a time when there was a lot less structure, a lot less kind of guidance for how you're supposed to conduct yourself as far as getting licenses and what's legal, what's not, all that kind of stuff. So yes, but at the same time, I think it's been an important lesson in holding yourself accountable to if or when a project gets in that situation. It's not about, okay, let's burn all the documents, it's obfuscate. It's about, okay, we did this wrong, but we, get the right legal guidance. If you're doing something wrong or you're at risk of it, get the right legal guidance. And then B, hold yourself accountable, right? These laws didn't exist a few years ago. I think it's more important to hold yourself accountable, go to the table, take whatever fines are at stake. In most cases, these are civil suits, not criminal suits. So hopefully you have enough treasury to deal with that. And then also in a lot of cases, I've seen that there are no fines. It's a matter of these laws come out, you hold yourself accountable, and you become part of shaping what these regulations become, right? Especially in a place like where I'm at in Hong Kong, that's what we're seeing now, to where, 6 years ago, there was a very abrasive kind of perspective from both the Hong Kong and Chinese government. And now they've kind of pivoted to where we have this opportunity to help shape these laws to where we're creating an environment where, yes, there's going to be points of disagreement, but at the same time, if you're honest, if you hold yourself accountable, there's not so much risk as far as legal or financial consequences. It's more about figuring out, okay, what are the new requirements, what the licenses, what do you need to do to prepare yourself for what's coming next, right?
Yeah, thank you. And John, what advice do you have for someone who is new in the world of Web3?
I think it really boils down to doing your own due diligence, really understand what you're investing in, what you're getting into, understand the fundamentals of, the difference between putting your coins, your Bitcoin, your Ethereum on a central exchange versus having that in your own ledger, your own Trezor. And then besides that, really just being willing to make mistakes as far as if you're trying to play around with DeFi or what have you. Say you're willing to risk $10 to understand how this stuff works, and you're okay losing that, right? Don't risk anything you're not willing to lose, even in the context of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are relatively stable for crypto standards. But there is always a chance that the central exchange gets hacked, the cold storage wallet gets hacked, you lose your cold storage device, your dog eats your seed phrase. That's literally happened to me before, where a dog is eating a seed phrase. And so you have to be prepared for stuff like this, as far as knowing what the outcomes, what the kind of precautions you need to take in that event, as well as also kind of understanding that is a risk, and to diversify kind of how you're spreading that risk out. Maybe you want to have custody from a central exchange or a central entity. If you're, a big institution or family office, maybe you want to use Hex Trust for custody, something like this, versus in the context of retail, you want to have things on a central exchange because you don't want to have to worry about if your dog eats your seed, or if your cold storage device gets broken. You want to have to you have a customer service person to rely on, and you've done your research on that exchange, you trust them. So I think it's really about, part of what people always say in Web3 is financial freedom, decentralization, to a degree of democratization of data. And I think part of that is also freeing yourself with the knowledge you need to come into the industry armed with, to have the right operational security, to make sure that you're not going to be taken advantage of, and that you also know what to do in the event of something going wrong.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And my last question is, could you please name top 3 criteria for the project you would invest in?
Top 3 criteria. For myself, I'm very much a team and fundamentals guy. I mean, I'll give you 2. A third, let's see, third. Those are the two I always go with. The third, let's see, team fundamentals. Probably at this point, I think it's about having moral fiber and integrity, right? It's not so much about being the smartest guy with the best product. Is this the kind of guy that's going to do the right thing when things get tough? I think that's something, moral fiber is something that's becoming more and more important, especially after what happened at the end of last cycle, right? I think, so basically team meaning, is this a founder or a group of founders that they mesh, they're capable, they can pivot, they are hungry, and they're also flexible to pivot when things aren't going right. It's not about kind of either knowing when to punch the brick wall or knowing when to try and pivot around it, right? And then fundamentals meaning, are you giving me a solution to a problem that I've never experienced, that I never have, that I don't have data to support that this problem is something that 80% of people in this vertical are going to have? Or is it a solution to a genuine problem, right? I think fundamentals are very important. And then again, moral fiber and integrity, I think, are more and more important these days. I think one of my as far as my leadership style goes, I've based a lot of this on a guy called Randy Pausch. He wrote a book and he had a lecture at Carnegie Mellon, which is like a great university for VR kind of stuff like that. I know we're shilling for Stanford, but Randy Pausch is really a legend. One of the things he said during his last lecture ever is that when you're young, it's fun to enable your own dreams, but as you get older, you'll realize it's even more fun to enable the dreams of others. So I think that's also something that comes into play as well, as far as making it not so much, going back to moral fiber, as far as not making it so much about yourself, but your team, the people you're trying to help, and really, whatever business you're creating, what is the kind of crux of why you're doing this, as far as like the why, right? Not how the how, not the when, not the who, but it's about like, what's the real reason. If it's just like, oh, I'm gonna make a quick buck, I think these days it's not good enough, right?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming.